and welcome to another Spectrum Geeks video. My name is Dale. Actually, it's now Captain Dale. That's right, I'm now a qualified pilot, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about my experience with the skills test, how I prepared for it, what I went through in the process to hopefully help you when you come to do your skills test here in the UK. So before you start flaming me in the comments, I know as a general aviation pilot you don't need your elevates or whatever they're called. My brain's not working now, but I just thought it'd be funny for the intro. So the idea of this video is I'm going to talk to you a bit about my experience doing the skills test, kind of how it went, kind of what I did to prepare, what I presented during that session, give it more insight in the hope that it helps you if you're preparing for your skills test, because if, like me, you were quite nervous about this because it's been a lot of build up to it. So this will probably be a somewhat lengthy video, but bear with me and hopefully it is of interest. So I'll start off by saying I am going to very briefly touch on how many hours and what have you before taking the test, but I will do a separate video on how much it cost from starting to get my pilot's license. I think that's an interesting and often common asked question if you think about becoming a pilot. So yeah, I passed my skills test a few weeks ago. I've been meaning to get around to doing this video and it's just getting prolonged and prolonged, so try and do it now before I forget. And apologies for any background noise. I have my air purifier going in the background. There's a high pollen count here in the UK at the moment, so it's just doing its bit. Okay, so my first tip or first suggestion is, if your school doesn't mandate it, hopefully they do already anyway, but I recommend doing a mock skills test with a different instructor. I found it to be really valuable to basically have a 2-hour session out going through a mock test for a couple of reasons. One, to get some kind of idea of what it's actually going to feel like when you do the skills test, and to obviously identify any areas that you're weak on, because there may be some things that you're going to do on your skills test that you haven't done since like lesson 4 or lesson 5 or something. Hopefully your instructor has been getting you to do a few of these things on a more regular basis, but it's good to kind of refresh yourself on the stalls and everything. So that would be my first recommendation as we go into it. And then just for some context, so I was deemed ready to do my skills test after I'd done 55 hours and 5 minutes, and that equated to around 44 hours and 45 minutes with an instructor and 10 hours 20 minutes solo. And of that, I think 1 hour was instrument flying. That's also a requirement, and I'd also done 113 landings up to that point, so landings and takeoffs obviously. So that just gives you some idea of the metric of where it was that I got to. 45 hours is the minimum, and the average seems to be around 60 hours, so kind of in the rough ballpark. So obviously in terms of preparation, all of your training up until now is the preparation to doing this anyway, so there's not really too much to cover off other than you should be doing these things already. But the number one thing that I recommend that you look at is a CAA document, which is SRG 2128. I will pop a quick glimpse of it up on the screen. Excuse me. It's available for you to view on the CAA website, and this is basically the examiner's form for the skills test. So it's going to give you a little bit more an overview of what it is the examiner's going to be kind of considering and ticking off as you go through the test. Hopefully, obviously before the skills test starts anyway, he's going to take you through that, but just as you're getting yourself mentally prepared, understanding the 6 different sections that are covered in the skills test. They may not all be covered kind of one by one. Certain little bits and bobs will be covered from different aspects, but obviously that's the main syllabus that you're being assessed on. And in terms of whether you get a pass or a fail, obviously you've got to pass all components or all subs, all of those 6 sections. I think you might be able to get like a minor issue in 1 or 2, but if you fail one of those kind of complete sections, you may have a partial failure. So what that means is, for example, the test is kind of split up into 2 areas, the nav and then what I call the skills bit, so the stalls, glide descents, landings, etc., that kind of thing. So if you did really well on your nav but you messed up some of the stalls and things, you may get a partial pass So then when you have to kind of redo the test, you're only redoing half of it. But if you kind of fail significantly in 2 sections, it'll be a total failure and you'll have to basically reset the whole skills test. Obviously the instructor either way will give you some feedback if you do fail on what you should have some additional training on before attempting it again. So hope that kind of helps. So now let's talk about kind of how the session went for me in terms of skills test, what I did, kind of how I prepared during the day and the morning, and actually getting myself ready for the skills test. So first things first, my skills test was in the afternoon, or about 11:30 I think it started, but I got down to the airfield 4 hours early for really 2 reasons. One, I had to drop my kids off and then I didn't really have much to do anyway. I'd taken a day off work and I thought, well, I'll get down there, kind of relieve any stress or whatever, have plenty of time to take care of things. And actually it was good that I did, because a couple of things, when I was kind of doing my check over the plane and checking the fuel for my weights and balances, it needed a fair bit more fuel, so I managed to get that sorted out. And also it'd been a couple of weeks since I'd flown, and I realised I didn't have the latest chart, so I had to kind of get a new chart, and I'd already drawn up my route first thing in the morning. So your instructor will give you either the evening before or the morning of the route that you're going to plan for your nav. So I'd already done that all on my old chart in the morning, and then obviously then realising I had to kind of transfer everything over. So planning the route, obviously you've done this before with your solar navs and your cross country, so just go through the same process that you always do. Make sure you consider the weather, like you should be doing always anyway. Print off the 214 and the 215s and check the METARs and TAFs and make sure you're kind of all up to speed with that. I'll show you in a moment kind of what I prepared and what I showed to the instructor as we went in to demonstrate I knew what was happening, what was going on. So again, you're planning all that out, getting your whiz wheel and sorting out kind of the wind differences and everything. Remember, for this you're not allowed to use any electronic devices, so no Sky Demon on your skills test. And I've purposely not really been using Sky Demon at all until passing, to make sure I don't fall into any kind of strange habits, so I can be, you know, pretty slick with the whiz wheel and everything still, and not having a problem there. So then put your PLOG together. So make sure you obviously got your magnetic headings, airspeed, everything, your times, your distances. And something that I recommend is, I was trying to buy their official kind of, I guess it's called a DP1. It's their ruler for a wind star, and instead you can just make your own. And I'll put a link in the description. If you go to Digital Innovations and WindStar, then this is an offline equivalent of that WindStar, where basically you can put in there all of the headings and the wind forecast on the day. So then when you come to do your diversion, you're not going to have to kind of be guessing and thinking, okay, but the wind is here, so it's 040, but I need to factor out something else. It's all written down there, so you'll know if it's heading 040, you'll add, you know, 3 degrees or -4 degrees or whatever it is, and also understand your speed based on wind, so you can get a rough idea of your timing. And the other thing I recommend, if you've not been using one already, is the RNP1. Took me again a bit of reading to get my head around it, but really makes diversions easier as well. So you can just kind of plot this on your map whilst you're obviously flying and quickly work out what heading you should be picking up, and makes things a bit more straightforward. So there's a couple of things there that I recommend for your skills test. So got my PLOG ready, done my WindStar, so I know what I'm doing. Then went and added fuel to the aircraft. As mentioned earlier, it didn't have enough fuel based on my kind of PLOG in terms of how much fuel I needed and how much fuel was actually in the aircraft. Then I came back and I did my weights and balances, and I did my takeoff and landing distances. So this may or may not be required in terms of the landing. Weights and balances definitely are. So make sure that you are ready with those things. So again, just to bring up to speed where we are in terms of what I was presenting to the examiner, I'd printed off my 214 form, so that was all good and ready. I printed off 215. I had been online to the NATS website and got the NOTAMS for the whole area that I'd be flying in. You should be asked questions as to how you check for NOTAMS, different ways you're doing it. So NATS website, Sky Demon, your school may also have them up there on a wall somewhere, to make a note of that. And then come to do the weights and balances. So obviously make sure you check the pilot owner's handbook for some of this information, and also check with the school that you know the correct numbers for the aircraft. So obviously this changes based on if it's been resprayed and other things. So get your weights and balances all sorted out and be ready to explain those. Again, I've not done it myself. Apparently you can use Sky Demon to help you with the weights and balances. Not something I've messed with yet, and I didn't want to get any confusion. So doing that all by paper so I could explain what I was doing. And then I had a little spreadsheet, again, using information from the pilot owner's handbook based on the wind, and it was a tarmac runway, what my takeoff and landing distances would be, both fully fueled and after the 2 hours of being in the air for the skills test. So that's another point. Your skills test should last around 2 hours. Mine actually lasted 2.5 hours because things got a little bit interesting, which we'll get to in a moment. And then on that same note, with reference in the pilot owner's handbook for your takeoff and landing distances, make sure you have those available as well. So I had the pilot owner's handbook, the tech log, the airworthiness certificates, along with aerodrome info, so I could confirm that I knew what noise abatements were, the runway lengths, everything. So again, you're trying to make sure that the examiner knows you are detail orientated, you're taking things seriously, you're professional, and you are safe with what you're doing. So again, have all those together as well as part of the pack that you're going to present to the examiner. Then I went and did another walk around. The examiner may want to witness you do it. They may just let you get on with it and then ask some questions after. That's happened to me. I did my walk around, and then when we went out to the aircraft together, then the examiner asked me certain questions about how would I check tyre pressure, tyre alignment, how do I know how much oil is in there, have I confirmed the fuel matches what was on the PLOG. He then also verified the fuel himself, and again we'll touch on safety briefings in a minute. So yeah, so showing all this stuff to the instructor, and then basically talking to him through my PLOG to explain kind of where we're going, who we're going to speak to, what kind of service we're asking for, why we're speaking to them, and what are we going to be asking for. So again, really making sure that the examiner really knows kind of what you're doing, and also the altitude you're planned to fly at and what your minimum self altitudes are. So he's again fully aware that you're doing everything, and even though it is an exam and you are being examined, you also have to treat the examiner like someone who's also never been in an aircraft before. So reassuring them, making sure they understand what it is that you're doing. And that then brings me on to the safety briefing. It's important that you give a safety briefing. Don't forget to do that. Looking online, it seems a few people forgot to do that. So I just put together my own little safety briefing chart that I can present to the examiner, and I spoke to him about all the contents on here, how to approach the aircraft, how the seatbelt's going to work, that I'm going to demonstrate that, where the personal locator beacon is, fire extinguishers, all this kind of stuff basically, so we understand health and safety, and then what I want him to do or not do whilst in the aircraft. So obviously he's not operating any of the controls, but can keep an eye out for aircraft and notify me in a calm way. So that's another thing that I recommend doing. Make sure you have your passenger brief ready, and then a couple of other documents that I printed off just to reference in case it was asked for, but I think the examiner was confident he could see all this stuff in my folder. So this is CAP 1535, part of the pre-flight checklist. There's more information on there. And I had some other information on the aircraft mass and balances and the performance for takeoff and landings. I also printed off this safety sense leaflet from the CAA for care of passengers as well, so in case that was a question. And then also some notes that I'd made on the Cessna 172 in terms of fuel or requirements, just stuff like that. And then I also printed off, just for my own reference, some chart information, just in case I got any strange questions on what does this mean on the chart, and I couldn't remember it, I could reference it with a document. And as I mentioned earlier, because I was flying from Gloucester, even though I'm familiar with Gloucester, you may not be, we're familiar with your airfield, or the instructor may not be, so making sure that I have information on the runways, noise abatements, both from the airfield itself as well as the more official information as well. So that's pretty much everything that I had, and I presented to the examiner, and he was impressed that I'd been quite thorough with that. So recommend basically you do something kind of similar to really demonstrate that you're serious and professional. I mean, you're going to be a pilot of an aircraft. One thing that I remember reading is kind of what the examiner is going to assess you on is that you are safe and you're proficient, and that they would let one of their loved ones fly with you. So once we'd done all that, we had a discussion with the examiner to basically take me through what was going to happen on the test. Took me through the SRG 2128 just to explain what he's going to be testing me on. Wonder if I had any questions, which I didn't. And then, as I mentioned, we went out and did the walk around, and he asked me different questions about fuel, oil, where the battery is located, what the antennas are, and then we went through the physical part of my safety briefing, physically pointing out where the fire extinguisher was, offering to show how to put the belt on everything, and then obviously we did our departure and taxi checks, which again you should be proficient with. Make sure you're not being mega assessed on your radio work in terms of CAP 413 proficiency, but you need to be very clear and articulating those things well. So keep calm. You've done this, and yeah, I actually think my skills test was my best flight so far, despite some of the challenges that happened in it. So let me talk to you now about the actual structure of the test, how things went for me actually whilst up in the air. Okay, so my particular skills test, my nav route was to go from Gloucester Airport, where I'm kind of home base, so pretty familiar with that location, out to Wantage, and then from Wantage to Clevedon. So going from Gloucester to Wantage is relatively straightforward. However, there is Bryce airbase there, so we had to request a zone transit. So that's obviously part of the test, make sure you can articulate and communicate that well based on where I'm located. And then from Wantage down to Clevedon, which would take me through Bristol airspace. So Clevedon's right down on the end next to the river. But I had an expectation that I probably wouldn't get that far, because what's going to happen on your skill test is, unless you make a big mistake on your first leg, somewhere on the second leg you're going to get your diversion and end up going somewhere else. But obviously you need to be ready. You don't know when you're going to get a diversion, and if perhaps you didn't perform super well on the first leg, the examiner's going to want you to fully complete the second leg, and it won't tell you your third leg for some reason that you may end up doing your diversion. So fully understand everything. So I make very clear on my map where the Bryce zone was, where I need to go through. Very clearly in my PLOG that I need to get approval to go through there to transit their airspace. And also looking out in terms of nav, I'm looking for kind of key identifiers, so wooded areas, but also high areas. So just behind Wantage Village, it is the start of some very high hilly areas. So I was looking out for that in the distance to help with my navigation. So constantly referencing the map, but obviously paying a lot of attention to what's going on outside, looking for traffic, and making sure you're not just kind of head down looking at the map and not actually doing good flying. It was actually quite a nice sunny day, but it was very thermally, so I was constantly kind of battling a little bit to maintain a constant level. And that's another key tip. If you've got issues like that where you're kind of gaining and losing So that's 100 foot up, 100 foot down as kind of thermals and different change of terrain. Make sure you acknowledge the examiner, that you've identified that and you're doing something to rectify it, so that they don't just assume that maybe it's happening automatically, or it's just going up and down and you're not in control. Remember, you are the pilot in command. You're dealing with issues and you're navigating and kind of resolving those issues as need be. So trip through Bryce was no problem. Been through there a few times. Happy with the radio calls to get zone transit. All went fine. Nav worked out really well, actually. Pretty straightforward. Again, apart from having to manage my altitude a little bit, and I had no height restriction through Bryce, which was handy as well. When I got to Wantage, adjusted my head down to Clevedon, and that's where things start to get more interesting. Because of the thermals, there was lots of gliders around. So obviously I had to keep a constant lookout for the gliders and adjust my heading to keep away from the gliders and manage that, which obviously was taking me off my planned route. So I had to keep on adjusting my heading to try and get myself back on route based on obviously what I thought my adjustments might need to be, and really maximising kind of key items I could see on the map, whether that be motorways, hill areas, again wooded areas, and train tracks actually, to then relocate to get to where I needed to be. When we got down to a place called Hullivington, I think it's called, I was asked to divert off to Barrow, so I did that. No real problems with the handy RMP1, and got my distances, drew my line, did a couple of waypoints, circled some areas on the map that I thought would be standout areas, lakes, again wooded areas, some built up areas, etc., that I could kind of reference as we went. And pretty much as soon as I diverted, more and more gliders were just appearing everywhere. And I will do an overlay of the map at the end. It felt like I was wiggling all over the place. I was wiggling a little bit when you look at the map, but it felt a lot more was going on. So I had to work really quite hard to keep kind of looking for key points, do gross error checks with what was on the map, what I was visually seeing, and adjust everything. But thankfully, it went really, really well. I kind of got to close to Barrow, and I could kind of see, after dodging around all of the gliders, that I could use the River Severn and the Severn bridges to check my route at that specific point. And there was some high ground to the east and some villages, so I could use that to kind of pinpoint where I was, pick up my track back on course to Barrow, and we arrived there pretty much spot on time. I think it was like 30 seconds different to my expected time, as I was constantly adjusting that as well as we went. So again, with these diversions and having to adjust for other aircraft, it is eating into your time projection. So you want to be acknowledging that as well, telling the examiner that, hey, I thought I was going to be there at 22 minutes past. Based on this, it's now going to be 24 minutes past, or constantly revising it. So just basically making sure you know what you're doing and communicating that well. The other thing I should mention, obviously on a regular basis, do your Frida checks. And again, tell the examiner that you're doing a Frida check and what it is that you're checking, so he's not just, again, assuming that you're just kind of pulling things out and hoping something happens. Communicate, communicate, communicate. So yeah, that then completed the kind of main navigation points of the test. Again, I was pretty confident that even though it was kind of busy, it went fast, and the navigation, we arrived, like I said, 30 seconds different to my estimation that had been revised on routes. Land smack bam on top of the location. It was pretty fantastic. Again, best flight and best nav I've done so far there. Then next part of the exam was to follow a VOR radial. So the examiner gave me the VORs he wanted me to pick up the radial from, and then we had to kind of pick up that radial and fly it. Then I was also asked after that to do a VOR position fix. So again, if you're lost, one of the ways to identify where you are is with a VOR position fix. So again, we did that. I did actually have an error with that the first time. No, it wasn't. It was with the VOR radio. I did kind of get my degrees messed up, but then through doing a gross error check, I identified that I got that wrong, and then clarified that I'd made a mistake and was going to pick up this route. That was before actually turning on the heading or anything. And again, the examiner said to me at the end, that was really good that you identified through your checks and you remediated it and handled it. So again, it's all about being pilot in command, being captain of the aircraft, demonstrating you know what you're doing, identifying issues, handling them, and doing something about it. So that went really well. Then it was on to the maneuvers. That pretty much then wraps up all the Navi bits. So now we're on to maneuvers. So again, remember, before your first set of maneuvers, do your HUEL checks. So make sure that there's sufficient height to recover, the airframe is all good, everything's safe and secure, so any bags aren't bumping around, seatbelts are on, doors, windows, everything's still closed, no problem there. Check your engines, T's and P's are still in the green. Then check your location, so not above any airfields, built up areas, not in cloud, not over any danger zones. And then finally do your lookout. So for my first lookout, I did a 360-degree turn, just to have a really good lookout. And then for my HUEL checks, I basically just did 180s, so 2 180s each time, just to make sure I was doing a really good lookout. So started off after again doing the HUEL check, doing steep turns. So that went really well, again, because it was nice and clear. Really good horizon that I could use to do my steep turns, so no problems with that. Then we moved on to IMC, so put the foggles on and basically simulating flying into fog, doing a rate 1 turn to get the hell out of Dodge. And again, no issues with that. I actually really enjoy doing IMC stuff, so look forward to doing IMC rating in the future. Then we moved on to the stalls. So first stall being a clean stall, power off, and pulling back until the examiner tells you to recover, as opposed to recovering at the first sign of a stall. Then doing stalls in the landing configuration. So this is to replicate if you were coming into land and you have a stall. So a clean, a 20-degree stall, 40-degree stall, and a stall, 20-degree and 40-degree angles of flaps, I should say. And then an angled stall which replicates you kind of turning on to final and stalling. So again, no issues with the stalls. That all went really well as well. Make sure you test your stall warner as part of your checks when you're doing your aircraft checks, so you know that the stall warner is or isn't working. And again, with those other stalls, you know this already, but you're doing those stalls at the first indication of a stall, so either the stall warner or a buffeting of the aircraft. After that, we moved on to slow flight. So the examiner wanted me to fly at 50 to 55 knots, first cleanly and then gradually 20 degrees of flaps, 40 degrees of flaps, and then just maintain the altitude and maintain that speed. So again, I'm pretty happy with slow flights. That all went well without any issues. Then after that, we went ahead and did practice false landings. So had an engine failure, or simulated engine failure, I should say. And then I had to obviously pick the field, do all my bottom down checks, see if the engine would restart or anything, then do my fake Mayday call. And then the examiner was happy that we would have landed. I did change my field towards the end because I didn't think I was going to make the projected one, so I adjusted my heading accordingly to another field that was more suitable. And again, he was happy that was the right thing to do, and no issues with that. And then moved on to do precautionary landings. So we did a couple of flybys of a field at a lower height to check for size, slope, and basically if we're going to do a precautionary landing because we think there might be a problem coming. So again, all that was absolutely fine. And then we went back to the airfield to do our landings. Just before that, actually, as we were coming out coming into the climb after doing the precautionary landings, I had a simulated engine failure after takeoff. So again, nose down, trim for best glide, and just basically pick any field that's close, and so you can kind of land in that to replicate, as you're coming out after landing, you have an engine failure. So then back to the airfield to do the landings. So one flapless landing, one landing with 20 degrees of flap, and at the last minute the examiner instructed me to do a go around to make sure I could replicate if there was an issue on the runway. And then finally 40 degrees of flaps was my last landing. And actually the last landing wasn't my best landing. The other two were brilliant, but the last one I did get a little bit of ballooning, so it made it a slightly harsher landing. It was still safe on the line and everything, but it was a slightly bumpier landing. But that was it. And then taxied back to the hangar, got out of the aircraft, kind of put everything back together, met the examiner inside, and he said, "I'm pleased to tell you that you have passed. Really well done." Again, I didn't have any negative feedback. He was really happy with everything. Called out specifically that it was quite a challenging day, especially with all the gliders, and the fact that we were up for 2.5 hours in the end instead of 2 hours, and navigated everything really well. And he really liked the gross error checks, how I communicated with managing the height, and also changing my field for the forced landing and everything. So again, really good experience, enjoyed it. The examiner made me feel well at ease, and like I said, I think it was the best flight I ever had. So hope this video wasn't too rambly. Hope there's some things in there that set your mind at ease. I did also purchase the easy PPL kind of video for the skills test. That was okay. Again, just providing me a bit more information of what to expect, but you know, trying to hear from people firsthand, which is why I'm doing this video, to hopefully help you put your mind at rest a little bit and know what you're preparing for. But again, remember, your instructor is not going to put you forward for your skills test unless they think that you're ready, and the examiner is not looking to fail you. You know, he wants you to pass, but he wants to make sure that you're safe and competent. So fly your best flight, communicate well, over communicate is my recommendation. He'll tell you to shut up if you're talking too much. Yeah, and enjoy yourself, have a good time. It's 2 hours flying. It's brilliant. We're really privileged to be able to do this, in my opinion. So thanks so much for watching. Again, I hope this video was helpful. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done already. There's lots of content on the Spectrum Geeks channel, more flying stuff to come. Again, I'll do a follow-up video about how much it cost me to get my pilot's license. There's other geek gadgety type stuff, cars, motorbikes, other things on the channel, and technology that hopefully you will enjoy. But until the next one, take care of yourself, and goodbye for now.